At the beginning of the movie, we see a girl who has regained consciousness in the basement, not remembering who she is or how she got here. She has an injured head and both legs are broken. A man who introduces himself as Thomas appears and informs her that her name is Ruby. She is 25 years old, an only child in her family. She was in law school and she is afraid of the dark. Ruby has been kidnapped by Thomas, who intends to hold her captive until she falls in love with him. Thomas says he will feed Ruby 3 times a day, provide her with painkillers and birth control, help her wash every other day, and go to the bathroom. In the basement, the lights come on at 7 in the morning and go off at 11 at night. The nearest settlement is 10 miles from the basement, and it is impossible to escape or call for help. Ruby cannot remember what happened to her, but notices a bracelet with her name on it. She refuses to take the pills that Thomas offers, but he insists, saying that she will make herself worse if she does not take them. Thomas gives no further information about the situation. However, he does not touch Ruby's purse of belongings, which lies on a chair in the basement. Left alone, Ruby manages to get to it. There she found some things, including her driver's license and a tennis ball. She decided to return to her seat, but the ball fell out of her hands, so she had to hide it in her pocket so Thomas wouldn't notice. Thomas strongly advised her not to move so as not to harm her health. Ruby kept asking Thomas what was going on, and he reminded her of his plans to hold her until she fell in love with him. He also explained that the birth control pills were needed to stop her menstrual cycle. When Ruby asked if he hated her before she was kidnapped, Thomas reacted aggressively. Thomas continued to help Ruby with her daily needs. One day, when Ruby was alone, she began comparing her face and her driver's license picture with her reflection in the mirror. Thomas noticed this and surreptitiously watched her. Eventually, Ruby broke the mirror and hid a piece of glass in her dressing when she heard Thomas blowing his nose outside the door. Thomas continued to keep watch in the basement and reminded Ruby that she could not escape. The days passed one by one. One day, Ruby decided to ask her captor what would happen if she could not fall in love with him. Since love cannot be forced, she tried to act calm and friendly so that he would not suspect anything strange. Thomas did not answer the question, but he promised Ruby he would bring her anything she wanted. Ruby asked for a blanket, a pillow, and a book. When Thomas brought it to her, Ruby started reading the book and realized that she had read it before. Thomas said that it was her favorite book and he had prepared well before proceeding with his plan, for he had brought Ruby red tea, the drink she had preferred before she had been here. Thomas explained to her that these items could help restore her memory as they were triggers for her brain. While studying the book, Ruby found a hidden clue that read, "Don't trust him." She realized she wasn't the only target. During her first dinner with Thomas, Ruby asked him directly about it, but he assured her that she was the only woman in his life. After Ruby deciphered the next clue, she discovered a stash in the wall that was filled with used matches with which the message was written. During the next dinner party, Ruby apologized for her behavior and asked Thomas to light a candle for a romantic atmosphere. To divert his attention, Ruby began to talk about being haunted by the same dream, how she was sinking deeper and deeper underwater. But at the last moment, someone pulled her out. While he listened to her, she discreetly took one match, and when she was alone, she removed the bandages from her legs, revealing no damage. One day she had a vision of a man in a white coat, injecting her with something and rendering her unconscious. She could not tell whether this was a real memory or a product of her imagination. Nights, Ruby deciphered the clues and brought herself back into physical shape. But she didn't let on that she was feeling much better. Whoever had left her those notes had one piece of advice: fake it. Ruby followed this advice, waiting for the right moment. One day Thomas cooked a special meal for her, and after tasting it, Ruby remembered sitting in a restaurant with a man she didn't know, eating the same dish and having a good time. Thomas admitted that he was that man, and they began dating and were happy. However, Ruby was not sure of the authenticity of her recollection, and she was not sure that it was Thomas who had had dinner. Ruby noticed a small, narrow window under the ceiling and realized she was somewhere in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by water. She spent her days reading, drawing, and talking with Thomas. Once, when he fell asleep next to her, Ruby tried to get out of the basement, but didn't make it as Thomas woke up. She explained that she was just bored and wanted to see what was behind the door. Thomas turned on the music and asked Ruby to a slow dance to create a romantic atmosphere. In her memories, she too danced with a guy, and they declared their love for each other. Even though Ruby already had a boyfriend, she was confused about what was true and what was false. To show the extent of his trust, Thomas gave Ruby the remote control for the lights and music. Ruby decided to dance for him, and when it came to intimacy, she recalled new memories, and Thomas helped her reconstruct the full picture of events. That night, Ruby was at a bar with her friend. He asked Ruby why there was no intimacy between them, to which she guffawed. Then, both of them, being drunk, went home, with Ruby not answering calls from Thomas. When the friend drove Ruby home, he did not accept her refusal and, using force, took what he wanted. At this time, Thomas arrived at Ruby's house. He was given a ride by his buddy Rob. There, he saw the unpleasant scene and, in a burst of emotion, reprised whoever had hurt Ruby. He noticed that she had lost her memory from the beating. Thomas decided to take Ruby away with him and persuaded Rob not to go to the police. He drove them north. Ruby remained in a semi-conscious state and remembered nothing. Thomas stole a boat and took her to an island where he found an abandoned farmhouse. He decided to help Ruby retrieve her memories or create new ones. Thomas researched all the information about her amnesia and noticed that if Ruby slept a long time, she would lose her memory again and start all over again. He devised a technique and played out various scenarios in front of her, even pretending to be a doctor, setting up the basement as a hospital room. Now he was playing the role of a kidnapper to make her believe that her legs were broken, and it finally worked. Thomas brought Ruby back her memories, and they were both happy. She and Thomas were just the two of them. Here and there was passion between them. When Thomas fell asleep, however, Ruby pulled out a shard of the mirror. As soon as the alarm on his wristwatch went off, she sprang into action. Ruby was convinced that her memories were false and that Thomas was a psychopath. She stabbed him multiple times and made her way out of the basement and into the street. Ruby ran to the river and to the boat, but passed out from exhaustion. In the last shot, we see Ruby waking up in the same basement, which has been converted into a hospital room. Thomas, dressed in a doctor's uniform, informs her that the operation was successful, but that she had a memory lapse. Before leaving, Thomas promised to notify her boyfriend that she had recovered. That's all for today. Subscribe and like it if you want more videos like this.